Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to this edition of Balance in Life. I am Crystal Tyler Mackey, happy to welcome you on behalf of the Virginia Cooperative Extension Human Development Program team and our partners, North Carolina Cooperative Extension. So here we are. We are talking again about money and finances, and some things we know have probably shifted. Some principles may have remained the same, but in this short time together, we have our expert presenter, Dr. Travis Mountain, back with us to talk about all things finances. Well, maybe not all things, but we'll get some good highlights. So as I get ready to turn things over to Dr. Mountain, I just want to welcome you if it's your first time and share some information, remind you and welcome you back if it's your second time that we do tend to engage quite a bit in the chat box. We are on a Zoom webinar platform rather than a Zoom meeting. So Zoom webinar platform in the chat box, if you post a thought or a question, if you do nothing else, the only people who will be able to see your good thought are my co-host Herman Macklin and presenter Travis Mountain. If you want others to see it, use the three dots for drop-down menu and choose all panelists and attendees so everyone can see your welcome messages, your questions, or your thoughts. All right, having said that, I'm going to quickly get out of the way and welcome back, Dr. Mountain.
Thank you very much, Crystal. Great to be here. And yeah, we're not going to be able to cover all finances. We will do about 28 minutes of highlights. So let's get started. Overview, we're going to talk a bit about financial goals, how to reach those goals, and then talk more specifically about COVID-19 and some of the legislation and kind of some of the financial impacts that we can expect still throughout the rest of 2021. I want to just start by showing this slide right here. If you attended any of my presentations that I did towards the end of 2020, I had a very similar graphic here. But the purpose of this is just to kind of give us a sense of how many people were affected by COVID-19 with unemployment, with socially distanced enforcement that was placed. A lot of businesses were forced to close down. So we saw a dramatic spike in unemployment, and we've had highest unemployment rates that we've had since the Great Depression. So about 14.7% was the peak that we reached. Now, this chart that I have on here doesn't show the most recent numbers, but I did look up the most recent numbers. And for March of 2021, the overall unemployment rate is down to 6%. However, if we break that down into demographics, we see that there still is a bifurcated recovery happening. So the white unemployment rate is 5.4%, so below the average. But if we compare that to the Black or African American population, we still see unemployment rates nearly 10%, so 9.6%. So we definitely see difference in recovery. Recovery is happening faster and slower for different people. That's just kind of the highlight of that. We're talking about financial goals. Here I have a really quick graphic I want to show, and this is just looking at percentage of people who have actually calculated retirement goals. Now, I'm focusing on retirement because there's a lot of research out there on retirement, but this could be calculating goals for an emergency fund. So in case something happens, such as losing your job, have you calculated how much money you need? But for this, we're looking at, have you actually determined how much money you need in retirement? So we're not asking here, do you have enough money? This is just simply, do you know how much money you need to get in order to live the type of lifestyle you want to live? And if we look at the oldest age demographic, it was those who are over age 55. Only 61% of those people have calculated how much money they need. If we look towards younger age people, age 25 to 34, only 38% of people have calculated how much they need. Why is this important? Well, it's important because some people are just arbitrarily saving dollar amounts. Maybe they're saving too much. Maybe they're not saving enough. Most people aren't saving enough. But it really is important to try to figure out how much money I need. So again, if we're thinking about retirement, we want to work backwards. All right, now this is kind of tricky. It's not the easiest thing to do, but we want to think about how much do you want to spend per year in retirement? So that's kind of the first step. And to keep it simpler, you want to think about in current dollars, how much do you need to spend? So This is very helpful if you already know how much do you currently spend, right? So maybe we have a household and they spend $40,000 a year. Is that $40,000 a typical amount? Do you think that that's going to increase when you retire? Do you think it's going to decrease when you retire? I was chatting with Crystal before we came on, and I have a 16-month-old, so we pay for daycare. When I am retired, I'm not planning on paying the $910 per month for daycare, right? So that's something that I want to adjust for. Now, however, I will probably have some other expenses that will increase. Maybe we want to do traveling. Health expenditures are most likely going to go up, right? So those are kind of things that you want to estimate. You also want to think about how many years before you retire. Are you 5 years away? Are you 15 years away? Are you 25 years away? The longer we have, the bigger impact we can have by saving now, right? The biggest advantage that people have is the amount of time that they have before they have to reach their goal. Starting early, starting small is much better than waiting towards, only a few years out and trying to save as much as possible. We also need to think about how much how long will you be in retirement, right? If you're planning on retiring at age 75 versus you're planning on retiring at age 55, for the typical person, they're going to be in retirement much longer if they retire at age 55, right? So that's something to think about. A lot of people, they have a set retirement age, and a lot of times it's right around 65. But we look at study after study, and most people retire prior to their planned retirement age. And for a lot of people, that's due to physical well-being. They're just not able to continue performing at their job, and they are forced to retire early. Now, a lot of that's going to depend on the type of job that you have, right? As a professor, for me, there's very little physical expectations for the job, right? On the other hand, if I was working construction or if I was working in a factory, now my physical health is much more important. That's going to determine if I'm able to work from age 63 to 65, for example. Once we kind of have those variables at least estimated, right, then we can calculate how much do I need to save in order to reach this goal. Now, for my undergraduate students, I give them a financial calculator. I ask them to calculate it, but there are dozens and dozens of online calculators that you could use. So one website that I usually recommend is going to dinkytown.net. You can see that link right in the PowerPoint here. If you go to dinkytown.net, there's dozens and dozens of calculators. Some of them are retirement, some of them are like paying down debt, some of them are more investment related. If you want to take out a 15-year loan versus a 30-year loan, all those types of things. So if you look at those retirement calculators, you could say, for example, maybe you need to have $400,000 and you need that money 20 years from now. And you can put in an assumed interest rate, maybe like 5%, and it will tell you how much you need to save every month or how much you need to save every year. So at the very least, out of this, I would encourage people to take a look at that. Try to get a sense of, am I on track? The earlier you do this, the better it is for you to gauge, okay, I need to increase my savings. Or if you can't increase your savings, maybe you need to delay when you're going to retire, right? Information is really powerful, so I always encourage people to check this out. Something else that you can use, so I use dinkytown.net. I also use mint.com, and I also use Personal Capital. So for mint.com, this is a website that you can use. It will help you budget. I think I've had an account for Mint for about, well, since 2009, so about 12, 13 years. This tracks all of my expenditures. So again, if you remember the first bullet point here, we're working backwards, trying to figure out how much you spend. So I could go to mint.com and it would say, Travis, you spent 20,000 this year or 50,000 this year or whatever it is. And then again, I can assess, is that a typical year or is that atypical? Is that what I plan on spending in retirement? So you can use mint.com. It also, you can set a goal. So once you realize maybe your goal is $40,000 or $400,000 20 years from now, you can create a goal in mint.com and it will tell you if you're on track, if you're behind, if you're ahead, those types of things. Okay. Another website that I like to use is Personal Capital. Now, Personal Capital is going to be used also for projecting, how much money I need to have in retirement. Am I reaching my goal or not? Both of these are free. Okay. Now, if you're not paying for a service as the client or the customer, you kind of are the product there. So be aware that if you're not paying for something, Personal Capital is going to be calling you. And why they are calling you is they want to have you as a client. So I get maybe one call a month from Personal Capital. I never answer it. It's from San Francisco. I just always reject it. They leave me a voice message every time. They're saying, "Hey, Travis, we would like to talk to you about ways that we can improve your finances." Now, I could talk to them. There's no expense for doing that. They're going to try to sell me on them being my financial advisor. If it works out for you, great. But otherwise, you never have to answer those calls. You could answer them and just say, "Hey, I want to continue using this free service, but I don't want financial advice right now." So I do use those two. I really like them. I think that they're effective. Talking about savings, so I mentioned this last time that I did a presentation. We had record level savings rate in April 2020. One of the big reasons for that is that's when most people received their first stimulus payments. So we had personal savings rate of 33%. So, for easy math, let's say I receive $1,000 in the month of April, I saved $330. If we look back just a few months earlier, the savings rate was 8.2%. February of 2021 was the most recent data that I could find, and we had savings rate almost 14%. Okay, so these are still really high savings rates. And we have been encouraging people with Virginia Cooperative Extension and presentations that we've been doing to make sure that you're saving money. Especially a year ago, we had no idea how long this was going to last, right? A year ago, we probably would not have estimated that we would still have unemployment rates around 6% a year later, or that we would have African American or Black unemployment rates at over 9% a year later, right? The reason why we're encouraging all this savings is because you're not sure when you're going to get your job back. For a lot of people, there's big concerns about their employer has shut down and they may not come back, right? So not only do we have high unemployment rates, but we're not sure, with the movement of moving to more digitalization, more things online, are some jobs just simply going to be lost forever, right? Now, the government has done some things to try to help offset those losses, which we will talk about. But again, save for a rainy day. It's more important now than it probably ever has been. And this is just another graphical presentation just to show you how dramatic this April 2020 33% saving rate compared to, otherwise we've seen some high rates in the 70s, but otherwise it's almost always been less than 15%. Okay, this is not the biggest chart or the best chart I'm currently realizing, but I did a presentation in December. I did a presentation of January this year. And I had a polling question up, and there were a couple hundred people on the webinar, and I asked them, did the stock market go up or did it go down in 2020? And we were about 50%. About 50% of people said that the stock market went up in 2020. About 50% said it went down in 2020. The answer is the stock market went up, and that's what this line is showing us here. The stock market, if we're looking at the largest 500 companies traded in the United States, was up 16% in 2020. That is far above average. Historically, the stock market returns about 10% on average. So it was a very good year in the stock market. Most people who thought that the stock market went down, they're focusing on this giant dip right here. March 23rd, 2020 was the lowest the stock market was, and it dipped around 33%. Okay. A lot of people, unfortunately, when the stock market goes down, that is when they sell, right? So a lot of people, they saw that for easy numbers, let's say they had $100,000 in their retirement account. They opened up their online account on March 23rd. They saw that it was down to, let's say, $67,000. A lot of people sold out of their mutual funds, sold out of their stocks. Unfortunately, when they did that, they missed out on this dramatic growth or this dramatic gain over the rest of the year. The average individual investor, what they do is they sell low and they buy high. Okay, now that's the exact opposite of what you would do in an ideal situation. Ideally, you would buy low and you would sell high. The problem is people, if they're looking at their financial statements, it can be devastating for them, right? To see that they've saved up the last 10 years, they got up to $100,000. And then over a matter of 2 months, it was down to $67,000. Okay. Now, I don't think anyone would have predicted that the stock market would have rebounded in such a short period of time, right? But it did. It was the fastest stock market recovery we have ever seen. Here's another representation of that. So here I have the stock market, and it's dating back to 2004. 2004, somewhat arbitrary, but that's when I started investing in the stock market. So when I was an undergraduate, I started my retirement account. So that was 2004. So if we're looking back here, 2004, we saw during the Great Recession, so a little more than 10 years ago, stock market went down, housing prices went down. This was a dramatic loss, a huge loss for a lot of baby boomers, right? For me, it really wasn't that catastrophic. Why? Because I was an undergraduate. I just had graduated a few years ago. The amount of money I had in the stock market wasn't very much, okay? But we see that that was a dramatic loss. Since the end of the Great Recession, the United States has had the greatest bull run that it's ever had. Okay, the stock market has gone from this low point all the way up to this high point, right? Now, we see that this shows the loss that we had in March of 2020. Again, that like 30% drop. The point of looking at this over a longer period of time is saying this was really a blip in the radar, right? A blip in your long-term investment. If you are planning on investing for 30, 40 years, you're not happy that the stock market went down, 30% over a course of 2 months, but we need to make sure that we're looking at the big picture here, right? So that's why I knew that I still had, potentially decades left of working. I wasn't stressing it when the stock market went down. Now, on the other hand, if I was 62 and I had all of my money invested in the stock market and I was planning on retiring at age 65, 3 years, 3 years later, I would have been stressing about it. That's why we talk about, if we were to focus more on a whole presentation on investing, the closer I get to retirement, the more conservative I want to be with my investments, right? Similar when we're talking about somebody saving for an emergency fund or somebody saving for a down payment on a house. Those are short-term goals. It's money that they need to have. I would never encourage anyone to invest their down payment money in the stock market, right? If you need that money 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, you don't want to take the chance that the stock market is down, okay? When you need that 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is for your down payment. On the other hand, if you have decades until you're planning on retiring, you can live out these swings, right? You can ride out the variance, the up and down, okay? Okay, so we are moving pretty quickly. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is talking about how to make your money go further. So we do have a Virginia Cooperative Extension publication. It's 10, 12 slides or 10, 12 pages long. You can do an internet search for how to make your money go further. Maybe if Herman is quick on the draw, maybe he can find it. Sorry for putting you on the spot there, Herman. But it is on there. It talks about different ways that you could either increase income, decrease expenditures, try to make your money go further. But what is important is that we're creating some type of spending plan, okay? Now it's potentially more important than ever. Since 2020, it's probably more important than ever. For my undergraduate students, I have them track their expenses for 30 consecutive days. Why 30? Because that represents a typical month, right? So they want to see how much money are they spending on beer? How much money are they spending on pizza? How much are they spending on rent, on entertainment, on all of these types of things, right? So then they have a sense, okay, I'm spending $1,500 a month. What do they think about that $1,500? Is that too high? Is that too low, right? Do they need to make some changes? Do you need to make some changes in your saving? That type of thing. You also want to look at all of your expenses, try to categorize them. Some of them may be flexible, right? So maybe my entertainment expenses, that's something that I could easily decrease if I need to cut. My rent, that would be a little bit more difficult to decrease, especially if I'm in some type of long-term contract. We also want to make sure that you are planning any type of future spending and that you're adjusting as you need. I already mentioned mint.com and that I use that. Mint.com is free. YNAB, that stands for You Need a Budget. That is not free. I'm blanking off the expense. It's somewhere between $50 and $100 a year, I think now, if you want to have a subscription to YNAB. I personally like YNAB better for budgeting, but I don't think it's as simple. If somebody wasn't used to using any type of technology for tracking their expenditures, I would encourage them to use mint.com. I think it's simpler. If you get the hang of Mint and you're looking for a little bit more advancements in your budgeting, you could check out YNAB. Alternatively, you could just do this right on Excel, right? If you didn't want to link anything online, you wanted more privacy, you could do it all on Excel. You could do this all in a notebook. These are just some options that people have. All right, $84 a year. Appreciate that. Thanks, Crystal. Okay, some other changes now that I want to get into when we're talking about things that could affect your budget. I'm not sure how many people who are listening here have children, but if you do have children, you're going to see more money. And the reason for that is to child tax credit changes that were passed last month. I think it was March 11th is when it was passed. Essentially, what this is doing is giving you more money. So depending upon the age of your children. So if you have any children that are under the age of 6, okay, by December 31st, 2021, you will be receiving an extra $1,600 just simply for having that child, right? So I mentioned at the beginning of this, I have a 16-month-old. He is going to be 2 years old at the end of this year. I'm going to be receiving, my family is going to be receiving an additional $1,600. That is just for 2021. Okay. Now, what happens if we had an older child? If our child instead was going to be between 7 and 17, we would receive an additional $1,000 in this child tax credit. Okay. Now, if we ignore these changes just for some comparison, in 2020 and right now in 2022, you would receive, just again, for having any child that's under the age of 18, $2,000. Okay, that's the child tax credit. So in 2021, I have one child. That child is under the age of 6. We are going to receive a total of $3,600 in child tax credit. $2,000, which is the standard, plus an additional $1,600 just for this year. All right, so this is a huge increase for those families. The objective of this is to try to decrease childhood poverty. Okay, so Herman put in the chat, maybe I should go adopt a child ASAP. Just kidding. Yeah, that is funny. But if you were to have a child and your child was born December 31st, 2021. So that child was only alive for 1 day in 2021. You are going to receive $3,600. If that same child instead is born January 1st, 2022, you're going to receive only $2,000. Okay, so just kind of getting a sense of how this works. So right now, this is just in place for 2021. Something else I want to encourage people to do is to check your credit report. So annualcreditreport.com is where I encourage everyone to check their credit report. It was recently announced that they are extending the free weekly reports through April of 2022. So last year when I was giving some of these presentations for Crystal, the deadline was April 2021 is when they were getting free weekly credit reports. Traditionally, you are only able to get your credit report once per year from the 3 main credit reporting agencies, but now you can do it once per week. So right after this presentation, if you go to annualcreditreport.com, you could pull your Equifax, your Experian, and your TransUnion credit report. A week from now, you could do the exact same thing. So every week you could check your credit report. This does not negatively or positively affect your credit score, so you can do that without worrying about any type of impacts. I think I have it later on in the presentation, but I'm probably not going to get to it because it is already 10:25. One of the big reasons why I push for this now is because anyone who is doing a forbearance on their mortgage, meaning that you don't have to make a mortgage payment right now, or anyone that has a federal student loan that's in forbearance or deferment with their student loan payments, you want to check your credit report to make sure that it is showing up as paid as agreed. Okay, even though you don't have to make any payments, when you pull your credit report, it should say pay as agreed. If instead it says late or missing, that means that it is incorrectly being reported to your credit report, and that is negatively affecting your score. Okay, so anyone who's in forbearance, just make sure that it's showing up positively as paid as agreed. And of course, you're going to be looking for anything else when you're looking at a credit report, making sure that there aren't any accounts on there that you don't identify, because errors do happen. It's possible that you have, an erroneous account on your credit report. So that's why I do encourage people to be checking that. If there's a new account that just was recently opened, fraud probably occurred. Okay, I have a Virginia Cooperative Extension publication on credit freezes. It's something I encourage everyone to do. You can go to Equifax TransUnion and Experience website. You can freeze your credit report. There's no cost to do that. No one could open up a new line of credit in your name unless you unfreeze your credit, which also means you cannot open up a new line of credit in your name unless you unfreeze your credit. So I encourage people to check out that publication. It only takes a couple minutes to freeze your credit report. It takes even less to unfreeze your credit report. Okay, in the 4 minutes that I have here, this is just an overview. We received 2 stimulus payments for tax year 2020. Okay, so one of them, most people received in April 2020. That was round 1. We received $1,200 per adult, $500 per qualifying child. And then most people, if they received stimulus payments, round 2 came in January 2021. Now, I was filing my mom's taxes 2 weeks ago, I guess, and she received her round 1 stimulus and she received her round 3 stimulus, which is on the next slide, but she has not received her round 2 stimulus. So if anyone, when they're filing their taxes, did not receive the stimulus payment, or they did not receive as much stimulus payment as they should, you can do a recovery rebate credit. Essentially, that's just another way for you to get your stimulus payment. So for my mom, we are going to do a recovery rebate credit. We're filing her taxes. We're going to say she never received the $600 stimulus payment. She will get that $600 as a recovery rebate credit. For the 3rd round of stimulus, so this is what was passed in March. Most people have already received this 3rd round, but it was $1,400 per person. So we have a family of 3, my wife and my child. So we received $4,200. Okay. Again, we're saving this, in case there's, another downturn. We're saving this in case, one of us were to lose our job or there's a big expenditure. But we received that $4,200 last month. This will be counted in your taxes as 2021 as a tax credit. For any of these stimulus payments, round 1, round 2, round 3, it is not taxable. You do not have to pay it back. There's a lot of misinformation out there that you have to treat that as income. You do not treat that as income. That is your money. The biggest difference that I think for this round 3 is that if you have adult dependents, they do count as a dependent for round 3. So let's say you had a dependent child who is an undergraduate. They're 20 years old. They now, your family would receive this $1,400. Let's say that you were taking care of a parent. Your parent's 70 years old and they are technically a dependent. You would receive this $1,400. The first 2 rounds, adult dependents did not receive anything. So a lot of people who had older kids who were students were a little bit upset about that. But for round 3, they would qualify as a dependent. Okay, really briefly in about 30 seconds. If you do have a federal student loan, the deferment currently runs through September 30th, 2021. So you do not have to make any payments towards your student loan. If you're not making those payments and you are in a deferment, it is not going to negatively affect your credit score. The big thing that I think is going to be a shocker for a lot of people is once we do need to start making these payments back, let's say you have a $250 student loan payment, have those people thought about they need to be setting aside that $250, or did they kind of forget about it and that $250 is now going to entertainment, or it's going to a car payment, or it's going to increase rent, those types of things. So I'm hopeful that a lot of people are still aware, even though they don't have to make the payments now, that it hasn't been completely forgotten. The last thing that I do want to say, because we are in the last minute, Congress did recently make some changes to unemployment. So in April 1st, so 2 weeks before the original tax filing deadline, they set up to $10,200 of unemployment compensation from last year is not taxable. Traditionally, any unemployment money that you would receive is taxable. So if you're married, both you and your spouse received unemployment benefits for each of you up to $10,200 is not taxable on your federal income. Virginia, as a policy, does not tax its unemployment benefits. The last that I saw, which was yesterday when I was looking at North Carolina code, they do tax the unemployment benefits, and it looked like North Carolina has a flat state tax of 5.25%. Okay, so just be aware of that. It's possible that North Carolina changes the policy, but when I looked yesterday, they did not. Okay. With that, Crystal, I'm a minute over time, so I will let you take it over.
Thanks so much. So much good information. So we were posting as much as we could, the links in the chat and the links to all of the publications. So we'll send that out to everyone along with the recording and the slide deck, if Dr. Mountain, if you're willing to share that.
Sure.
And we can send that out with everyone. Thank you so much for being on, and some of the conversation and the things around finances can be really complex, and as so much has changed over the last year, it's good to lift up some reminders for us and some resources for everyone. So thanks for being here. Herman, you have any final thoughts, questions, or comments?
Well, I just want to chime in on the beginning of the presentation where we were talking about budgeting and the importance of that. So many times that for years and years and years, I just said, oh yeah, well, I've got it all up here, it's straight. But when the pandemic hit and I wasn't doing all my extracurricular playing in bands and DJing and stuff like that, I thought, man, surely I'm going to starve to death without this extra income. And so I really started watching what I was spending money on, and doggone, I had more money than I had when I was DJing and playing in bands. Just because I was paying attention to where it was going and what I was doing with it, because I knew, okay, you're not going to be able to run out and make more money. You're going to have to make it with what you got here. And so that made me more diligent with it, and hey, it's working, you know.
Yeah, thanks, Herman. Ditto. It's amazing when you start really paying attention, you know, where you see those slippages, I guess, right? Or you just kind of spending and not really paying attention to just how many coffees you bought that week, or how many times you splurged.
That's right. That's right. I was probably spending all my extra income on eating out because right. I was so busy I didn't have time to cook.
I found the same. Yeah, the same. Always on the go, and everything shut down, and I was home. So I appreciate that, Travis. One of the things you said, and I want to lift it up again, is when we've had opportunities, you just talked about it with the student loans. If you've been able to pause student loans or other things that people have been able to, make pauses on in the short term, remember that they're coming back. So not to go start committing that money in other places or spending that money in other places. And then, when, that time is over and you have to restart, you're in a really tough situation. So I appreciate the lifting that up. And there's always the saving for a rainy day. We've heard that, probably all of our lives, but to your point, more important now than ever. So.
Yeah, well, and a lot of people just didn't think that something like this, being laid off or losing their job, could have happened to them, right? They just thought that they were immune to it. And we saw for millions and millions of Americans, that just wasn't the case.
Yeah. So here we are. So if we have the opportunity, now's the time to have the opportunity to do, if we are in a place to do some things differently, do some things in a better way that helps, set us up for a better success should something like this, God forbid, ever happen again, that we're in a better position to manage it. So having said that, I want to wish everyone a great weekend. Again, we'll send out all the links with the slide deck and the recording to all, but enjoy the weekend. I don't know what your weather is going to be like, but whatever you do, make the most of it. And, I'll just throw it out there. Maybe check out at least one of the links or the resources that will be coming your way. And start thinking about things that you can do to improve your finances. Even if they're already good, there's always room for improvement, right? So take care, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Mountain, for being here. Thanks all. See you next week.
Have a good weekend.
All right, you too.